Hello and welcome to episode 113 of Stitched in Sweden. My name's Maria and today I'm going to be sharing with you my two latest finished projects and my current WIP, and I'll be going through all of my lingering works in progress. So if that is interesting to you, stick around. You can find me everywhere on the internet as Stitched in Sweden. I have patterns available for sale on Ravelry and lovecrafts.com, and I have a Patreon account also where you can find additional content and ad-free viewing of my YouTube episodes. If you would like to join us there. I would also like to give a special shout out today to my Patreon followers for supporting me there, and as well to those of you who support me on Ko-fi by sending a coffee or a little support each week or each time I post a video. It's always really appreciated, so thank you. Today, as I said, we're going to start out with two finished sweaters that I have been working on and finished since the last time I recorded. The last time I recorded, or the last two times, have been sort of special episodes where I talked about everything I made in 2024 and also my plans for 2025. So this is the first regular episode in a while, so I've had a little bit of time to work on things since the last time. So up first off is the first project that I finished in January this year, and this is the Stockholm sweater by Petite Knit. I knit this in a fingering weight yarn and a mohair rather than the suggested double strand of mohair that is in the pattern. It comes up a little bit more brown on the screen than it actually is in person. I would say it definitely leans green. I knit this using Sagan yarn from Elk Market Yarns. I think it's the Ratatosk base. It's a 100% Corriedale. I used 200 and a little bit more than 200 grams of the fingering weight because I had bought two full skeins, and then she also sells 25-gram mini skeins. So I bought two full skeins and two mini skeins, and then I actually only broke into the first mini skein, and this one is just a full skein that's still wound up. And then I held it together with my favorite mohair, which is Isair Silk Mohair in the color number 68, which is a nice olive green color. And it has resulted in this beautiful, soft sweater. I am going to be going back now and adding a strand of elastic into the neck just to tighten it up a tiny bit, but otherwise I'm very happy with this sweater. I also may just really quickly, this is such a small thing, This particular cuff got stretched out a little bit weirdly because I put this sweater on before it was completely finished drying. So I might just wet this cuff again and kind of scrunch it back into place. It's a nice shape. It has kind of a reverse A-line, I don't know what that would be called, shape to it, so that there's just decreasing. It's not waist decreasing necessarily because it doesn't like go back out for the hips, but it just kind of goes in like this. It has a dropped shoulder, long sleeves, and it has quite long ribbing on all of the hems. I knit the first part of this and I was a little bit worried that I was going to be playing yarn chicken at the end, so I went back and did the collar before finishing the sleeves and the body. And I knit the collar with a different yarn on the inside. If you can see that it's a slightly different color green. I didn't need to do that in the end. I have yarn left over, so if I wanted to, when I'm making my collar adjustment now by adding in the elastic, I could go back and knit the inside part in the same color that the whole sweater was knit in, but I don't think I will. I think it's fine. I just wondered if I would want it to be slightly longer, the collar part, but I'm gonna try the elastic first, see if that adjusts it to the point that I want it to be, and if it doesn't, then I might go back and add some length to it. Then at that point I would also change the color. I guess one adjustment is that I did not do a purl row at the turn of the collar. Instead I did 3 rows of double knitting and then turned in the collar. So that is number 1 finished sweater and first finished project of 2025. The second project that I finished this year, I finished just last week, and that is a test knit for Vert Knit. It is still a little bit damp, and I am actually planning on sort of blocking it out for real while it's still a little bit damp right now. So even though it's been technically drying or blocking for the past day or so, it hasn't been put into the final position that I would like it to be in. So I'm gonna do that after I record now. And the reason that is because I find that I have these blocking mats. They're like these foam mats that you can put pins into. But I find that when I lay a sweater out onto those mats, it takes a long time for the sweater to dry. So sometimes what I'll do first is that I have this kind of spring mesh. I have this spring mesh arc-shaped drying mat, and I like to set that out first, let the sweater dry mostly, and then move it to the blocking mats for kind of the final positioning and drying. And then sometimes even after that, I'll do a little bit of finishing touches with my iron and like a lot of kind of steam. So this is a test knit for Vert Knit, getting back to that, and it is the matcha jumper, which I am so excited to have been a test knitter for. The test knit is still ongoing right now until the middle of March. So I knit this matcha jumper. I knit this one actually for my sister. I knit it in one of the original yarns for the test knit, this yarn called Olivia, and it is a 55% merino, 55% cotton yarn from Ovelha Negra. I don't know how you say that. It's a shop in Porto, Portugal, and they ship worldwide. It comes in this little cake like this, and if you've ever knit with Holst Garn Coast, I think this is a very similar, if not the same, kind of base and makeup of the yarn. Something that's really nice about this yarn is that 50 grams has 350 meters in it, so one ball goes a long way. And actually I finished the sweater and I still have one full ball of both the base yarn, which is that Olivia, and then even one ball of the mohair, which I used Cecia Vivienne. And both of these yarns I received, or I purchased them both, but I purchased them at a discount for the test knit. The Vivienne I purchased with my employee discount at the shop that I work at, and the Olivia I purchased with a discount from the shop. Now you can see that I smacked myself with that drying rack. Okay, a little bit about this sweater. This is such an interesting sweater because the construction is just beautiful in that it's seamless construction, but it's not just a standard kind of top-down raglan. It's instead what I would call a contiguous saddle shoulder construction. So you can see if I show you the side of it here, this is the shoulder bit that just transitions smoothly into the sleeve, and there's a little pearl detail here that just kind of accentuates that line that I think makes it a really just elegant seam there. And then the detail of the saddle shoulder in a way continues down into the body, or it's mirrored again in the body with a side panel sort of that's delineated with also with a pearl bump there. The collar and the hems and the cuffs are all knit in twisted rib. I have slightly less length of twisted rib, I think especially on the sleeves. I think I knit the body to length, but I think I knit the sleeves a little bit shorter because my sister, who I was knitting this for, wanted more like wrist length sleeves rather than like half hand sleeves, which is what the pattern is written for originally. I knit a size 5, which is one size larger than the recommended size for my bust measurement. But so you can see how it looks on me is with a bit of an additional positive ease than is recommended in the pattern, but I think it still has a really beautiful fit to it even at that size. And I would definitely make this size again for myself if I was using this yarn combination for sure. This sweater knit up pretty quickly, I would say. It's been very fun to be involved in a test knit, which has a Slack group connected to it. So there's been a lot of interaction there, and it's just fun to be kind of on the other side of the test knitting process, being a test knitter rather than conducting the test knit myself, that I've done, you know, for my patterns. And it's really fun to see everybody's versions that they're knitting. Many people are also using the same yarn. A lot of people are using, I think quite a few people are using this Issei or mohair, not this particular color, although this, I do think this is the color which the designer is using for her second test version. It's just been really fun to kind of be part of the community of knitters in a different way than I typically am involved. So those are my 2 finished projects that I finished recently. Another project that I actually did finish in the month of January that I don't have with me to show is the Dahlia sweater. I knit that in Issei 20 and 2 strands of the silk mohair held together, and that is just makes such a gorgeous fabric. I haven't knit with 2 strands of mohair together ever before, and it just adds so much softness and fluffiness to the fabric. It's really gorgeous. I knit that for the shop that I work at, and it is currently down in Stockholm at the knitting and, I think you could call it, well, it's called the Sewing and Handwork Show Festival. So yeah, och Handverksfestivalen in Stockholm this weekend. So I don't have that to show, but it is another sweater that I knit in January. Let's move on to my knitting works in progress. I have one that I'm currently actively working on, which is pretty typical for me that I work on one project at a time. I don't like to have a lot of WIPs going at once because then I just feel like I get nothing done. So yeah, I think one at a time or possibly two at a time is a good level for me. I'm knitting another matcha jumper. So I am knitting my second version of the matcha jumper, and this is the one that's going to be for me. It is knit in Cardiff Cashmere Classic in the color 517, and I received this yarn as yarn support for the test knit from Cardiff Cashmere. This is a 100% cashmere yarn. It comes in 25-gram balls that are 112 meters each. So I have 11 balls for the size 4 that I'm going to make for myself. In Vertknit sizing, I fall exactly at a size 3 or 4, like right smack in the middle. So kind of, you know, deciding how much positive ease I want to have, and a couple of other thoughts went into me finally deciding I was going to go with a size 4. First, that I've been enjoying having slightly more positive ease in my sweaters lately, but I also wanted to take into consideration that this being a 100% cashmere sweater, my plan is to wear this as a layer itself, not as a layering piece. Like, I'm not planning on having this as an outer layer over a long sleeve shirt. I will just have this maybe over a camisole if something, or if anything. So I wanted it to be a little bit of a closer fit rather than the more oversized fit of the original green version that I did. I decided to knit size 4. In the pattern, she has given suggestions on some modifications that you can do, including modifications for bust darts if you want to create more fabric on the front of your garment so that it doesn't lift up in the front if you have a larger bust. Those modifications are included. There's also a modification included if you have a wide shoulder measurement, and she gives a measurement for your shoulder from the tip of this bone here that you can feel, measured across the back. Now, for me, I know that I often, if not always, make a broad back adjustment for sewn garments because I have a broad back, or I have a wider back measurement than is standard for the rest of my body size, like my bust size and my waist and hip, for example. And the same was true for this standard size chart in this pattern. So according to the measurements, I would have been in maybe a size 8 or 10, I can't remember exactly, for my shoulder measurement. And because my shoulder measurement was 3 centimeters larger than the measurement given for my size that I was planning on knitting, then it's recommended or suggested that you might benefit from a wide shoulder adjustment. So I thought about this and I considered it for a while to think if I was going to do it. It's a small and easy change to make. But then I also put on the size 5 that I knit and thought about the position of the saddle shoulder there and how I liked that and the fit of it, etc. And I steam blocked this version a little bit without the shoulder adjustment to see where it was sitting on myself. And in the end, I have decided that for me, it's not actually only about having a wide shoulder measurement, but it's also that I have bad posture and my shoulders roll to the front rather than, you know, I don't sit like this. I sit with my shoulders to the front. And sure, I need to maybe work on my posture a little bit better, but I also know that that is a more natural position for my shoulders. And so in sewing, this is called a forward rolling shoulder adjustment that you can make, which you can adjust the position of the top seam of your garment. So you have a little bit less fabric on the front and a little bit more fabric on the back. So it changes the position of the shoulder seam, and that also changes the way that the sleeve, if you have a sleeve, changes the position of how the sleeve falls and like where the sleeve cap is. So maybe more information than you wanted to know about that. But with that kind of in mind, and knowing for me that yes, I have a wide shoulder, but it's more of like that I have a broad back, because I don't think that I have a particularly wide shoulder in the front, if that makes sense. Like this distance isn't particularly wide. It's more that I have like a wider back part. So in the end, I decided to go with a straight size 4, with the exception of adding 4 additional stitches to only the back part. So that gives me 4 stitches, gives me 3/4 of an inch or 2 centimeters additional fabric on the back, which is more in line with how I make adjustments for sewing patterns. So if I put this on, I currently have my trying on tubing in here. It's a little bit difficult to get a fully accurate picture of how it is on because I don't have the collar in yet. I think it's much better to actually put in the collar first, because that changes like how the neck position is. But I wanted to get an idea of whether or not this plan of mine was working before I got too far into the knitting, in case I wanted to rip back and do the suggested wide shoulder adjustment. So as you can see, here is kind of the saddle sleeve, and even though it is still a little bit like back, I don't know if you would want it to be like that, maybe more. So potentially I could have I could have additionally maybe taken away 4 stitches from the front cast on when I added 4 stitches to the back. That probably would have been smartest. Am I gonna do that? I don't think I'm gonna do that. I think I'm gonna go with it like this, because I don't want to be overfitting it either. It's a knitted garment, and because knitted fabric is flexible and stretchy, then there's no reason to be like, sometimes you can get into a mode, especially for me with sewing, that like you're trying to make it fit exactly perfectly. I think that there's a balance between making it fit well and like spending an excessive amount of time and energy on perfecting the fit. Like you can always make little adjustments, but yeah, just don't let perfect be the enemy of the good is a good motto to go by, I think. So I've added a bit of fabric in the back. I think that's going to make the shoulders sit in a little bit of a more of a position that I would like them to be in. And I'm going to be continuing a little bit further down now with just a bit more of this. Now it's sort of almost like a raglan shaping, but it's not quite. It's just such a beautiful design. I'm so excited for other people to be able to knit it, because it's just such a well-written pattern, and it makes such a beautiful garment in the end. So this is knitting up really quickly. I'm enjoying knitting with the cashmere yarn a lot as well. And I think it's gonna make a gorgeous finished item. Now I would like to at this point go up and pick up for the collar, because I'm at the end of a ball of yarn. So before starting the next ball, I would like to do that. I don't have a small circumference size 2.5 millimeter, I think it is, or US 1.5 maybe, for the neckband. And I did the other one on magic loop, which worked fine, but I would prefer to do it on a 40 centimeter, 16-inch circular, because also the needles that I was using for the magic loop are my Haya sharps that I have in the sock sizes. And for me, the sock sizes are too sharp with the Haya sharps. And unfortunately, I come to realize that those sock sizes don't come in the non-sharp version, which I think is too bad, because I think that the sharp ones are too sharp, because they're too sharp because they poke your finger and it actually hurts. So I think I'm going to be trying a different needle for that neckband. I've been having a lot of thumb pain still, so I'm trying to be mindful of that, and I know that twisted rib is a little bit of a trigger for that thumb pain, so I'm trying to balance things out a little bit with not doing too much twisted rib at a time, but also making my needle situation as comfortable as possible while I'm doing the twisted rib. Let's go ahead and talk about my other main work in progress. This one has been on the sideline since the test knit came up, because once I got the yarn for the test knit, I prioritized that so that it could be completed and give feedback appropriately during the deadline. What did I put aside in order to do the test knit? Yes, this is vest number 7 by My Favorite Things Knitwear, and I have been planning to knit a vest in this yarn since early 2024. I had actually considered possibly knitting a cardigan with this yarn, but after 2024 being a year where I often ran out of yarn, I decided that rather than playing yarn chicken on a cardigan with this yarn, I would go ahead and play it safe with a vest. So I decided to go with vest number 7. I have vest number 7 as a finished sweater or finished vest from my friend Andrea, who knit it for herself and then decided it wasn't for her for whatever reason. And I thought, no, it's not for me either at first, because it's not really a color that I generally wear, a kind of cool bluish gray. But I love wearing that vest and I wear it all the time. So I thought it would also be nice to have a darker colored one. I am knitting this with one strand of Spun Right Round in the Classic Sock base, which is a 100% superwash merino. This color is called Rust, and I'm pairing it with Derirum Natura Vernice, which is another one of my favorite mohairs, because it's like the Essayer Silk mohair. It is super kid mohair, which is way softer than kid mohair. So if you have a sensitivity to mohair, I definitely recommend trying out super kid mohair. So I'm pairing these two yarns together. They've been in my stash for a little while, and I'm really loving the results. I have knit the front and back part joined underneath the arm. Now I'm knitting along the body, and I've got a little bit more to go. It's really nice to already have this garment finished. Even though I didn't knit it myself, so the gauge is not the same, I was able to cast on for this, and I knit for a little bit and thought, no, this is turning out way bigger than I wanted it to. I'm 90% sure that Andrea did not swatch for her vest, which is fine. But since I know that I like the fit of that one, rather than going based on the size in this pattern that I think that she knit, or that she said that she knit, I am holding up my knitted piece against hers and comparing that way to make sure that I'm getting relatively the same proportions and size, so that I end up with a vest that is very close to the same size as the one that I already have. So I think that this will go quite quickly once I pick it up again, but I won't pick it up again until after I am finished with my second matcha jumper. I'm definitely gonna have enough yarn for this one because I'm still on the first ball of the Spun Right Round, and this is the second ball out of 4 that I have of the mohair. So I'm probably gonna have leftover. That's kind of the thing, I guess. It's one downside of being most inspired by yarn and then picking the project afterwards is that sometimes you end up with more or less yarn than you actually need. At the same time, I picked out this yarn exactly for the matcha jumper. Since it's still in a test knit, I don't know, she might be adjusting the yarn requirements if she gets a lot of feedback that there was a ton of extra yarn from her testers, but keeping in mind that I also shortened the arms a little bit. If you had knit them to the required length for size 5, you probably would have been pretty scared or would have run out of yarn. You definitely would have. You would have run out of mohair, maybe not the Olivia. But I'll talk about what I'm going to do with these plans in just with that leftover yarn in a little bit, because I do have a plan for that. But today I also said that I would pull out all of my other works in progress to show you what I have on my needles currently, because I think sometimes, well, it's really individual for everybody, right? Some people have tons of WIPS on their needles and some people don't. And I'm somebody who gets overwhelmed by having a lot of projects that are unfinished on the needles. So I prefer, and that's something that I have learned about myself over time, is that I prefer to be working on one project at a time. If I have 1 or 2 other projects that are on the needles, that's okay. But I really feel best when I'm working on one sweater at a time, or one large garment, and then maybe an accessory on the side. But like now, when I have had sweater plus vest, the vest is just completely, like, I have not knit a single stitch on my vest since I started the sweaters. I think I knit on the vest while my swatch was drying, but that was it. That's kind of the sweet spot for me, is one garment on the needles and maybe an accessory. What do I have? Where are my WIPs? Oop, that is going in my water. Let's start out with the most recent WIP that I have, which I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to continue with, or if I'm gonna just leave it as this WIP form, or if I'm gonna rip it out, or what. This is the Alma mitten, which is a pattern from Maya Åkerström, and I mean, it's beautiful, right? Oh. I'm knitting this in some leftover yarn that I had. If you saw my most recent video where I shared my knitting plans for 2025, I also shared my entire yarn stash as it is right now, after doing a big de-stash at the beginning of the year. And so I was trying to think of some ways that I might use some of those yarns that I have, where I have one box, little summary, I have one box of like new skeins that are full skeins, beautiful, inspiring, yes. And then I have one box of leftovers, skeins that are already wound up, small pieces left over from other projects, full skeins that are left over from other projects, less inspiring, but I tried to make it as inspiring as possible by kind of arranging it by color. And so looking at that box of yarn, which is also yarn that I've decided and said to myself, this is yarn that I do imagine knitting with sometime in the future, I thought, okay, let's cast on a little in-between project, right? So I cast on these mittens, which this is the second time that I've knit this pattern. The first time I knit them as a gift for my boss at work. I'm gonna run out of yarn. So I know that this takes 50 grams of each color, approximately. And unfortunately, this ball of yarn, which now I don't even have the label anymore, but I know that it's a yarn that I'm not gonna be able to find again. It's just a basic kind of beige colored wool. I think it is superwash, but it has like more of a rustic non-superwash feel to it. The ball in its unused form was less than 50 grams, which is a little bit interesting because this is kind of a pattern that I have noticed lately. not a pattern, but like, let's just say that some balls that say that they're 50 grams are not 50 grams when you get them. Some balls that say they're 25 grams are not 25 grams when you get them. So I actually noticed that both with the Cardiff Cashmere and with the Cecia Vivienne, which both say that they are 25 grams, both of them are underweight, which is kind of a bummer because, like, for the Vivienne, for example, I bought 6 balls for my project. That was the required amount. There's 210 meters per ball, 25 grams. So I only used 5 balls for the project, but let's just say that for my size, it was six balls suggested. And with 6 balls of yarn, if each ball is 3 grams short, you're missing more than a half. Yeah, you miss a half a ball worth of mohair in the end, which seems kind of like a lot to me. I don't often weigh my yarn at the beginning of projects because I just assume that it's right based on what it says on the tag. But for this one I did because it's a test knit and I wanted to know exactly how much I used. I actually talked to Cardiff Cashmere about this since I got this yarn as a gift for this project. And then I was kind of worried that, am I gonna have enough yarn to finish this sweater? And I wanted to let them know that these balls were a little bit short. And what they told me was actually something that's a little bit interesting to consider. They said that wool is what word did they use? They sent me a response very quickly to my query. And they said, thank you for your message and for informing us about that. As you may know, natural fibers such as cashmere and wool are hygroscopic, and they lose and gain weight depending on humidity conditions that they are in. The instrument that you use might have also influenced the weight, sure. So the box you have received could be quite dry. In any case, thank you for highlighting this for us. And I just thought that's quite interesting because it's not something that I've considered before. So this very well could still have 112 meters in it, and that's actually what matters, right? The weight of it could vary based on the humidity of the yarn. Now, I live in a very dry place right now. I don't think I'm going to test this further, but like if I did want to, I could, you know, put these balls of yarn next to my humidifier and then weigh them after, and maybe they would weigh more. I don't know. In the end, it doesn't matter so much, but for this project, it's mattering because I know that a mitten requires 25 grams and I should have made this color, like I should have used it in reverse because I have more of the white. And I think I thought that I was doing that, but now when I look at it, like obviously I wasn't. So I don't know what I was thinking. I probably wasn't thinking. But now when I'm here, I'm kind of like, should I continue? I could rip back the thumb and make the thumb solid white, maybe. Could work. Do I want a solid white thumb? I don't know. If I made the thumb solid white, then maybe I get a pair of mittens out of it. So that would be positive. Anyway, that was a long conversation about these mittens. I really like this pattern. I definitely see myself knitting them again, maybe not with scrap yarn. I have 2 other works in progress on my needles, and then that's it. As I said, I just don't like to have a lot of things on my needles because it stresses me out. These have been on my needles for a long time. You may recognize them as the hibernal socks, which is a pattern from Summer Lee Design. And this is my second one. I've showed these on the podcast before. I don't even know where the first one is right now. It's probably somewhere over here. So I'm just starting kind of a little bit down the leg of the second one. And I'm knitting these. These needles are not my favorite. And actually, I don't know why they're on these needles because I had to use these ones for something else. These are my favorite ones. These are Haya steel, which is not the sharp ones. So for size 2mm, 2.25, and 2.5, I prefer the steel tip. These are a fixed circular steel tip, size 2mm, a US size 0. And I prefer this 5-inch length, which I think is 13 centimeters. No, that doesn't sound, yeah, must be right, 13 centimeters for magic loop, because of the way that I hold the needle when I'm knitting with the way I hold my pinky. I prefer the longer needles for magic loop. Long story short, I don't know why I put these ones on these needles. So the other thing that I like when doing magic loop is I prefer a 32-inch cord, and this is a 40-inch cord. So I prefer this 80 centimeters, 32 inches, rather than 100 centimeters, 100 centimeters, 40 inches. These ones are just on hold. Like, I just don't knit socks very often. I would like to get back into knitting socks. My gauge is loose enough that I pretty much always have to knit socks on a 2mm needle, US size 0. It's just not my favorite. I would like to be back to the stage of my knitting life when I could knit socks on a US 2. I don't even know what that is, 2.75mm, and still get like a nice dense fabric, but I'm not there. The only other WIP that I have in my box at the moment is a pair of socks also, and this is a pair of socks for Thomas. They're planning on being a pair of socks for Thomas, but I don't know if I'm going to continue with them. Again, this goes back to sort of not loving the needles. So I was trying to knit these with my Haya interchangeable sharp sock size, and I was trying to use a 2.25mm. I think they're coming out pretty wide. The fabric is an okay density, but I thought I would try this slightly larger needle because this yarn is also slightly larger. I think this is Croy something. I don't know what it's called. Something Croy. You probably know. It often comes in like self-striping colors. This is just a red pair. Thomas has quite a few pairs of hand knit socks, but he's been wearing them. I mean, I knit him quite a few pairs of socks like 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, like around then. And like he wears them every day in the winter and sometimes even in the summer. And so a lot of them now this year have gotten holes kind of all at the same time. And so he really needs some new socks to replace those ones. So that's another reason why I would like to work out a better sock solution for me for knitting socks. I think the solution is going to be Haya steels in the fixed circular, and I'm gonna get the size 2.25 and 2.5mm as well. The only thing that I don't like about these fixed circular ones, and I'm not sure if this is true also for the larger sizes, but they're not swivel. So the interchangeable Hayas that I have anyway are swivel. So like the needle moves separately from the cable, and that's not the case with the fixed circulars, which I guess is why they're called fixed circulars. Yeah, that's just one downside for me. So this is the only other work in progress that I have on the needles. And again, that's kind of one that's just sitting there waiting for me to pick it up eventually someday when I'm like in between projects, or maybe, you know, going somewhere and want to just grab something quick. But otherwise, just nothing that really gets worked on so much. I will mention also really quickly that the yarn for this is Hey Sister Yarn Co., which no longer is dyeing yarn. This is a kind of standard 75% merino, superwash merino, 25% nylon sock yarn. And this is the color Hey Baby. This is the leftover yarn from my Fortune sweater that I'm wearing today. And this is a pattern from Petite Knit. I had tried this on, I haven't worn this sweater hardly at all. And I had tried it on again in my 2024 makes video. And I tried to think like, I love the color of this sweater. I didn't give it a very high rating. What do I not like about this sweater? And I'm happy to say that I've adjusted it in a way that I'm now wearing it again. So one thing that I didn't like was that the neck was too tight. It just felt like too tight. I do like the funnel neck look of it, and I also like the option to be able to fold it down because I think that also looks nice. I wasn't sure what to wear underneath it, and I think for me this is definitely what I've realized is this is definitely a spring sweater rather than a mid-winter sweater, and which is fine because it's a beautiful color for spring too. That's because it has eyelets in it, and the shirt that I was trying to wear underneath this was a merino turtleneck shirt, and I think that was adding to the chokiness feeling. Nora has to get picked up from school. Okay, what was I saying? So this is definitely a spring sweater for me because of the eyelets. Wearing a turtleneck merino shirt underneath it didn't work. What I'm finding is working well is that I have a merino tank that I made, which is the Bluma tank, I think. It's a high neck, quite high neck tank top, and it's in this color. And I think that works well underneath it. So I think I'm gonna be wearing this more now. So what I did was I just took out my iron and put this on the ironing board and steamed the neck out a little bit larger so that it didn't have that kind of choky feeling. And now I'm finding that it is one that I'm grabbing more to wear, which I'm really happy about because I really like this yarn and I think that it's a really pretty sweater. So now, in the few minutes that I have left, because Nora needs to be picked up from school, since she is sick apparently, let's talk really quickly about sewing. I have finished a few sewing projects at the beginning of this year. I made a couple of doll clothes for my older girls. At the end of the year, last year, like since I last recorded, I made a Christmas tree skirt and some duvet covers. Those are things that you can find on my Minerva profile if you want, which is linked also in the description below. The main thing that I'm excited about having finished this year, finally, is something that I shared over on my Patreon last week, which is the process of sewing up some pillows for our couch in the living room. We have kind of two living room spaces, one where we have our TV and kind of our cozy couch where we eat snacks on it, and there's popcorn in this, you know, everywhere, and it's not that bad, but you know, when you take the cushions out, there's some other little snacks in there. And then we have our kind of front living room where we have more upright sitting chairs and our leather couch that was a gift from my parents. And that space has been a little bit of an odd space in our house because we didn't have enough furniture to fill that space when we first moved into this house. And now we've kind of slowly been adding things to that space. Anyway, for the last year or so, I've wanted to make some bright pillows to add a little bit of color into that area, and I did this last week. Really simply sewn up some pillow covers, and I actually also made the pillow forms themselves, which I talked all about in my video, so that's over on Patreon. But I'm just happy with how those turned out. I think that soon I'll definitely be getting more into garment sewing again. It's always the case for me that over Christmas and like after any Christmas sewing is done, January is often a time that I am more into knitting, and February kind of carries into February as well. And even then, sort of maybe at the beginning of March, I start thinking again about what clothing we might need for the next season if there is going to be a good spring and summer this year. So just yesterday I started making my initial list of kind of what are the items of clothing that I would like to see in each of my girls' drawers in spring and summer 2025, so that I can then go through and count, like, okay, if we need 6 short sleeve items, whether that's a short sleeve shirt or a short sleeve dress, how many do each of them have at the moment that fit them? How many additional ones do we need to acquire, either by buying them or making them? I do have plans to buy a little bit of fabric specifically for Eloise. Unicorn fabric is hard to come by. Tasteful unicorn fabric, let's say, is hard to come by, in my opinion. When it comes to jersey fabric, I have found some which I'm going to try out to make a short sleeve gathered waist dress for her, because that is one of her go-to kind of favorite things to wear at the moment. So we'll see how that goes, and what other items I might be sewing up soon, but I'll probably go again into more detail on my sewing plans on my Patreon account. So if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I was planning on doing a question and answer this week, but now that I need to go pick up my daughter, that's gonna have to wait until next time. But that could give us an option to, yeah, if you have question and answer. I did one kind of call out for that on my Instagram account, but if you have a question for me, would you leave it in the comments below this video, and I will try and make that part of my next video that I record. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Happy knitting!